Welcome to The Conservative Edge. I'm Dr. Joe Corey, your host. This show will give you an edge on the truth. We deal in depth with each and every issue. Today's issue is abortion. And I think this is one of the dark side of our culture, that we're having so many abortions. But with us is a man who's trying to do something about it. We have with us a man who had dedicated most of his life to the issue of abortion. His name is Joe Poiman, Executive Director, Texas Alliance for Life. Joe Poiman has lobbied for pro-life issues in the state capitol for 27 years and has been twice ranked as one of the top 10 lobbyists for causes by Capitol Inside magazine, higher than the lobbyists for NARAL, Pro-Choice Texas, and Planned Parenthood. Under his direction, Texas Alliance for Life helped to bring into law all major pro-life bills since its founding, including the Parental Notice and Consent laws, the Parental Protection Act, the Sonogram Bill, the Choose Life license plate, defunding Planned Parenthood, and House Bill 2. Dr. Poiman, it's such a pleasure to have you in here. I am impressed and amazed at your dedication to the saving the lives of the unborn. Dr. Poiman, it's such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Doctor.
And I look forward to our conversation. Abortion in the United States was made illegal in the 1880s. And then all kinds of problems developed as a result of that. It did not solve the problem that we intended to solve. In many ways, it made it more pronounced, as many people were having what is called back alley abortions. There were two entities. One of them is called Jane. One of them is called Red Stockings. They were really encouraging women to go to certain places where they could get abortions. And many people say if we make it illegal right now, we go back to back alley abortions. That's not the main subject for us today, but what is your reaction to that?
Well, I would say, first of all, Texas had its first pro-life law that protected unborn babies from abortion back to 1854. And that law was operating very well. Doctors were prosecuted for abortions under that law. Nationally, we think there were maybe 100,000 abortions per year, illegal abortions in all of 50 states. After Roe versus Wade came down in 1973, that number quickly jumped to more than 1 million and then up to 1.6 million per year. Today, things have changed enormously in two respects. Number one, we have across the nation a tremendous number of pro-life pregnancy resource centers and infrastructure of love to help a woman who has an unplanned pregnancy and needs help with that. And they will provide her with all of satisfy all of her needs so that she can safely give birth to that child. They will track her for 2-3 years to assure that she and the baby are well taken care of for. That didn't exist back in 1973 and in the 60s. The second thing is, we now know beyond a doubt that human life begins at conception, that the unborn child is a baby. And society knows that now. So we look at polls and we see that teens and young people are far more pro-life than their parents. They get it. They understand it. They see those babies on the ultrasound machines. So things are vastly different now. It's really a very different culture than it was in the 60s and 50s and before that.
Well, it sounds like we're moving in the right direction. Let me focus on a couple of things, if I may, first. Roe versus Wade, 1973. Supreme Court saying basically the woman has the right to her body effectively, and she could do whatever she pleases. But they made with her body, and abortion therefore is legal. But they added something that is very interesting, I thought, and I'll mention it to you, see what your reaction is. The state interest became stronger over the course of a pregnancy. The court resolved this balancing test by tying state regulation of abortion to the third trimester of pregnancy. Now, the idea here is that, yes, woman has the right to abort if she wants to have it, right? But they kind of gave guidelines on later term abortion, particularly mentioning third term abortion. Do I have it correct?
That's what Roe versus Wade said, yes.
Exactly. Now, later, the Planned Parenthood versus Casey, the court rejected Roe's trimester framework while affirming a central holding that a woman has a right to abortion until fetal viability. This is in the Planned Parenthood versus Cases in 1992. Now, that's a very important affirmation right now. Based on that alone, it seems to me what happened in New York, Dr. Poyman, is what? Is that it could be reversed easily by the Supreme Court ultimately. Do you agree with that?
Well, the Supreme Court said states may proscribe, in other words, ban abortions after the child is viable. But the Supreme Court didn't say that states have to do that. It's up to the states to ban abortions if they wish to after viability. So New York had a ban on abortions. It was weak, but it was present. And what New York has done is to repeal that law. So those babies are not protected, even up to a full-term baby, up to the moment of birth. That's what the courts did. They left discretion after the baby's viable. And when is viability? For a healthy baby, somewhere around 23 weeks into pregnancy, into the near the end of the second trimester. It's amazing to me that the Supreme Court says states are not permitted to protect babies before 23 weeks. I mean, these are babies that have fingers and toes, arms and legs, beating hearts and so forth, measurable brain waves. But that is what the Supreme Court has dictated to the states, and that's what we have to try to contend with.
Are you saying that we will not see a challenge to the New York court going all the way up to the Supreme Court?
No, it wouldn't be possible because the Supreme Court has said they have the discretion to ban abortions or to not ban abortions if they wish, and they have chosen to not protect those babies.
That's incredible. Now, do you think this is going to be a trend that other states will do the same? I know you know that Virginia had tried to do that and it did not pass.
They have. We hope it's not a trend. We think a few states will do that and mimic what New York has done, which we think was very unfortunate. It will not be a trend in Texas. I can assure you of that. It will be just the opposite in Texas and many other states. But Texas, for example, we have had a ban on abortions in the third trimester, and even at the moment of viability or slightly before. Our ban begins at 22 weeks, protects those babies all the way up to term, up to birth. No one has challenged that law in court. So that's been on the books for about 5 years, and it's been working very well. So New York is not going to be imitated in Texas, and I can really assure you of that, and many other states.
Yeah, the problem with that argument, if I may point out to you, Dr. Poyman, is that the travel between states and medical procedures across states are very common in our country. And many of the people who have these abortions, we have about over 1 million abortions, as you indicated, per year. That's about half of all the pregnancies in America are actually aborted. And one wonders why these people don't take care before they have sex, as that's an argument we will probably talk about later. But anyhow, those people who want to have an abortion, late-term abortion, will all flock to New York.
Well, that's certainly true. And there's already late abortions going on, for example, in New Mexico and a couple of other states. And people are flying from Texas and other states to New Mexico. There's a doctor in New Mexico who does abortions apparently in the 8th or 9th month of pregnancy. He is just incredible. So there's nothing we can do to prevent that, but we can do state by state what's possible. And also, Texas has invested both the private sector and public dollars enormously is what I call this infrastructure of pro-life pregnancy resource centers that provide alternatives to abortion. So the goal of those organizations, church-based organizations, Catholic Charities has a great network of organizations. These more than 240 private organizations that help a woman, and their goal is that no woman would seek an abortion because she feels there are no alternatives. they do provide the alternatives, and for many, many women, make abortion unnecessary. In Texas, the numbers of abortions have gone from more than 90,000 per year, which is just a mind-boggling number, down to fewer than 55,000 per year, while the population of Texas has grown enormously. So the rate is going in the right direction.
Well, I understand that, but as I said, the seepage, so to speak, from the system could be quite substantial. So in New Mexico or in New York, if a doctor performed the late-term abortion, there is no consequence to the doctor. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's okay. Well, in Canada, since we're talking about availability of abortion, since 1988, abortion with no restrictions are possible. You could go first term, second term, third term. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You could do it in Canada. In Africa, by the way, just so that we make it more complete, there is something called the Maputo Protocol. And all of the countries, about 49 countries in Africa, decided to adopt it, which allow for abortion in the case of incest, rape, and the health of the mother. So it seems, and the latest vote that has taken place in Ireland, as you know, Doctor, the vote on abortion, as you know, it was banned in Ireland, but
Yes.
It passed. It passed. So the world is going in the direction where we are trying to minimize abortion and try to redefine what is first term and second term. I understood from my reading of abortion, I'm not an expert like you are, but from my reading on abortion, I understood that the baby's heart begins to beat around 12 weeks. Why isn't that a period of, so to speak, viability? If the heart is beating and everything looking fine, is that different from the viability that you just defined?
Yeah, actually, the heart is actually beating about 3 weeks or less, and is detectable by the doctor at 5 or 6 weeks. And why does the federal court, the Supreme Court of the United States, not recognize that as a place by which states can start to protect those babies that age and older? It makes no sense. The viability standard they have adopted is purely arbitrary, and it really doesn't have a basis in science. But that's what they adopted, and every time a state passes a law that protects babies earlier than that age, it gets struck down by the federal courts. 3 states have passed laws that ban abortions after the time that baby's heartbeat is detectable: Arkansas, North Dakota, and Iowa. And in each of those states, the courts have struck them down as unconstitutional. It's very unfortunate. We need more. We need the Supreme Court to revisit this when we have the votes and change that.
So you think the Supreme Court will take up abortion again? Everybody is worried that with the conservative Supreme Court like we have right now, that they are very likely to turn Roe versus Wade on its head. What do you think?
I'm not expecting that to happen anytime soon. My hope is that in coming years that might happen, but I don't see that happening in the very near future. Now, my crystal ball is not any more clear than anyone else's, but tracking the cases the Supreme Court has not taken or not handed down in these recent months and years, my guess is that Roe versus Wade is not going to be significantly changed in at least several years.
Okay, we talked about the right of a woman to control her body. We understand that. But that control over her body could also start before she has intercourse. That is to say, there are all kinds of mechanisms right now, pills, procedures, whatever, to prevent pregnancy. Do you think the availability of abortion encourages people to be less careful before sex?
Well, in terms of bodily integrity, let me point out something first, is that there are 2 bodies involved: the woman's body and the unborn child in her womb. That child is individual. It may be of a different sex, a male unborn child, as opposed to the woman who obviously is female. That child deserves bodily integrity protection as well. As far as your other question about should birth control figure into this, our organization does not take a stand on birth control. Some of our members support methods of birth control, others do not. Our vision begins at protecting those babies who have been conceived, and that's our goal to do.
I understand, doctor. But the bigger question to me here is that, do you think that the pregnancy begins at conception?
Oh, pregnancy begins at conception, which means fertilization of that child. When the sperm and the egg unite, that's when that child comes into being.
The clock, as far as your organization is concerned, starts at conception. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Now,
let me also say, Dr. Curry, I am concerned that parents should give consent before a minor, a girl 17, 16, or 15, is given birth control. That should not be done without parental consent.
Well, I know you lobbied for that, doctor. Yeah, I know you lobbied for that. Were you successful?
Yes, that's correct. Parental consent is required in Texas.
Now, if she walks into Planned Parenthood clinic and she said, I want an abortion, did you notify your parents? No, I did not, but I want an abortion. Planned Parenthood will have to turn her down. Is that correct?
Well, that's correct. And actually, the onus, the burden to notify and get consent of a parent is with the abortion doctor. Just like any other medical procedure, the physician would have to contact or get consent, written, notarized consent of a parent. And that's the way it should be. If a minor is in school and the nurse wants to give her something like an aspirin or a Tylenol, in Texas, that nurse has to get the written consent of the parents. Even should be more the case with abortion, which is an irreversible, potentially life-threatening invasive procedure, and that ought to be done only with the consent of the parents. Of course, we believe it should never be done at all, but the point is, since it's legal, at least the state of Texas should require that doctors get the consent of parents, and that's what's happening.
Okay. I want to ask you maybe a deeper question. The woman is entitled to do with her body whatever she chooses to do because it's her body, even though she's pregnant and there is a life growing inside her womb. Does the father have any rights in this regard?
Well, yeah, you're talking about what the Supreme Court has dictated to the states, that the woman has to be allowed to have an abortion for any reason up to at least the time of viability. And under current Supreme Court precedent, the fathers have absolutely no rights whatsoever. One state, that was Pennsylvania, required that the husband of a non-abusive husband who was married to a woman who had an abortion, Pennsylvania required that husband had to be notified, and the Supreme Court struck that provision down as unconstitutional. Men have no rights legally in this debate whatsoever until the child is born, when they are obligated to provide child support, which is a good thing and a just thing. But it is just stacked against parents. It was until the parental consent law was passed. Husbands have no rights. And the unborn child has zero rights regarding abortion until the moment of the child is viable, can live outside the womb, even with medical attention. So it's crazy, and it is very different than, you mentioned other countries, but Europe is nothing like this. France, England, Spain, Italy do not allow abortions as late as we do in Texas or in the United States. They just do not. France, Spain, Italy, for example, only allow first trimester abortions.
It's interesting that Italy, where it is surrounded by, it has the Vatican. Vatican is an independent state, of course, but with the Vatican in Italy, they still have abortions.
Well, I think that much of Western Europe is post-Catholic and maybe post-Christian. That we saw that in Ireland. There's going to have to be a lot of rebuilding of culture if we want to take that back. If we can pass protective laws in Texas, like it or not, many other states look to Texas. That's our goal. And if we can change the nation of the United States with better precedent from the Supreme Court, hopefully we'll have a positive influence on the rest of the world.
So let me ask you further, if I may. The father of the child has no right. Her family could have, unless she's underage, her family has nothing to say about it. Her doctor may have something to say about it, because if she's under 18 and he performs the abortion, that could be a problem for the doctor. Is that correct?
Right.
And in this permissive age of ours, it seems that most states will allow it. In our case, it's allowed under Medi-Cal. Is that correct?
It is up to the states, and most states already have laws that would sanction abortion. Most states do. But it would be a state by state battle, just like other issues like how much medication or how much social services, the state provided social services are paid for. It's state by state.
Is any consulting required before a woman says, I want to have abortion? For example, if she walks into a clinic, is there like a gestation period where she said, okay, let's tell you what the consequences are. It could have serious consequences about your ability to reproduce in the future. Certainly it will kill the baby. It may give you some medical problems in the future. Is there anything that the clinic could say to discourage her or to give her second thoughts about getting a pregnancy?
Well, that's a very good question. And actually the Supreme Court answered that question in that case you mentioned, 1992, Planned Parenthood v. Casey. And in that case, the Supreme Court upheld as constitutional Pennsylvania's requirement that a woman be given certain information by the doctor who's going to do the abortion, and certain information about the risks of abortion, the alternatives, that being childbirth, the risk of childbirth, and information about agencies that provide alternatives to abortion. And that information had to be provided at least 24 hours before the woman consents to an abortion. So she has time to digest it, think about it, and look into the alternatives. That law exists in Texas also. That was challenged by and was upheld by the federal courts, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. So the Supreme Court does allow that. It's fairly limited, but at least some provisions are permissible under the federal law, and many states have passed those requirements.
Very interesting. As you very well know, the American government used to provide money for abortion overseas. Is that still the case, or have the Democrats, President Trump tried to stop it? Have the Democrats succeeded in reestablishing that money for abortion overseas?
Well, we haven't paid for actual abortions overseas for many decades. But the question is whether organizations who do provide abortions can receive federal funds. And the Trump administration has implemented something that first originated under President Reagan. It's a very good policy. It's called the Mexico City policy, and it prevents tax dollars from going to organizations that would use it not for abortion, but to promote abortion. And that is no longer permissible under the Trump administration's Mexico City policy, and we're very happy about that.
I'm glad. But I thought some of the funding was just allowed, some kind of a bill just passed Congress, reestablishing the money that Mr. Trump, President Trump, has redirected. And that happened recently.
I'm not apprised of that, so I'm afraid I can't answer that.
No problem. All right. Now, about the process of life. We start in the womb, the baby is delivered, we go all the way to the point where somebody is very old, and some people think that euthanasia is okay. So if we allow late-term abortion, which to many people looks like infanticide, and we are allowing euthanasia on the other end, how valuable is life still, or the value of life, has it been undermined in your mind?
Oh, I think you're alluding to a very good point. If we allow abortions of any kind, it devalues life for all of us. And we think that a just society, a society that truly is just, has a right and a responsibility to protect innocent human lives, members of our society, and that begins at conception, fertilization, and goes through people who are disabled and people who are very, very elderly. So our organization very strongly opposes euthanasia. We very strongly oppose infanticide, which would be killing a child at birth or deliberately letting that child die who might continue to live merely because that child is disabled. These are very grave crimes against the humanity of those individuals, and we think society must protect those individuals. Otherwise, we cannot call ourselves just or honest.
Yes, I appreciate that comment. I took time to watch a video about the dilation and extraction method. It's called DNX. And frankly, Dr. Poyman, I was horrified. I was really horrified. I can't believe that any doctor would want to do a late-term abortion, unless, of course, the mother is about to die or is affecting. And the consequence to the mother's health after that kind of an abortion are quite serious. So that's why I said if some kind of counseling is required, like some states have, you want to get divorced, is fine, you are entitled to get divorced, but we want you to have a period where you could just talk it over, maybe you'll change your mind. There is no such thing for abortion, is that correct?
Well, there is counseling, as I said, sometimes, but it varies state by state, and in some states there is no counseling. And there's an argument out there, Dr. Curry, that these late abortions are only done to save the life of the mother. That is absolutely not true. There are numerous videos of survivors of abortion, people who are adults now who were in the womb and a doctor performed a late abortion on the mother that was not successful. And in the sense that the child was born alive and continued to live, and they are now here to tell us their stories and put a face on abortion. They are very emphatic that when their mothers had abortions, it was not to save the mother's life. It was frequently for social reasons. Sometimes the family pushed the mother into having a late abortion. And these are cases where abortion is just not necessary. And we have humane and compassionate and peaceful solutions for those problems. A woman does not have to hire the doctor to dismember that baby or to kill the baby in the process of being born or to cause the baby to be born prematurely and then allow that baby to die. And that was defended by the governors of Virginia and New York, and that is horrendous to most people. I agree. How can a doctor who has years of medical arts and training use those arts to take innocent human life in that fashion? It boggles my mind, and I think most people are very offended to learn about that.
I was particularly offended when I heard the governor of Virginia explain basically that how they're going to take care of that late-term abortion. We're going to put the baby is out of the womb already. I mean, how disgusting is that? And then they could decide whether they want to kill the baby, and the baby is outside the womb. It's horrific.
Well, Doctor, let me also say that the Senate and the Congress is trying to pass a bill that would make it illegal if the child is born alive during an abortion to allow that child to merely die. There have been some votes in the Senate, and not being partisan, we're not a Republican or Democratic organization, but it was certain senators, Democratic senators in the Senate, U.S. Senate, I'm speaking about, have stopped that. The author of that bill is Senator Sass from Nebraska, and his bill is called the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Act. And it has not been able to pass in the Senate or the House in the Congress right now. It's unbelievable to me, but that's what's happening.
Astonishing. I took a quotation here from an article I read about this DNX procedure. Allow me to just read it. It's only 3 lines. The doctor dismembers the fetal part that has been brought out of the vagina and removes it. The rest of the fetus remains in the uterus while dismemberment occurs. And I understand that the woman carries a dead baby for a couple of days. And then she could literally go to the bathroom and lose the rest, whatever is left in her uterus. The question here is, knowing all of that stuff, How can we continue allowing any abortion in the third trimester unless the life of the mother is decidedly in danger?
Well, again, many states have banned those very late procedures. To us, all abortions are equally horrendous in the sense that they all take the life of an innocent child without any reason, no real reason for that. But the late ones just shock our sensibilities because in one hospital ward, the child is maybe born prematurely and is in a neonatal intensive care unit, and all of those medical arts are being used, tremendous amount of staff and money, and rightfully so, to save and preserve that life. And in another wing in the same hospital, there might be a late-term abortion going on. Now, that's not possible in Texas, I'm glad to say, because of our laws. But in some states, that is happening, and it tells us something that this is actually going on. We need to depending on our states, New Mexico, New York, we have got to work through our state legislatures so that doesn't happen.
Understood. Doctor, you are one of the most effective lobbyists in Washington, D.C., and I salute you for that. I hope you will continue to be healthy and to be an advocate for the unborn. God bless you. I thank you so much for being with us, and I'm sure we'll talk again.
Very good. Thank you, Doctor.
This is The Conservative Edge. I'm Dr. Joe Corey.